This lecture on the Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetics profession is sourced from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics as well as CDR. The learning objectives for this presentation include being able to recognize the purpose and function of a professional code of ethics, to identify 4 fundamental components of the Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetics practitioners, to apply these principles and some of their respective ethical standards into a variety of professional practice settings, as well as to utilize the Academy and CDR resources to determine if an ethics violation has occurred. Ethics is a discipline that is concerned with conduct and morals. It helps to distinguish between right and wrong. There are 4 foundational ethical components of healthcare and medical ethics. These foundational components are also encompassed by the Professional Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetics practitioners and are integrated into standards that will be described in this presentation. The 4 foundational components are autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. This slide further defines the foundational ethical components which underlie the 4 principles encompassed by the Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetics profession. Autonomy means that all individuals have the right to govern themselves. Individuals should be able to make fully informed decisions. This means that nutrition and dietetics practitioners make all pertinent information available for individuals to make a decision. This also means that individuals are not coerced into making a decision. Non-maleficence means that nutrition and dietetics practitioners cause no harm to individual patients and clients. Harm refers to both physical and psychological harm. Beneficence encompasses taking positive steps to benefit others, which includes balancing benefits and risks. This means that nutrition and dietetics practitioners always act within an individual's best interests rather than their own interests. And finally, justice refers to equitable distribution of resources and opportunities. In other words, certain groups or individuals are not favored more than others. While professionalism may seem to be straightforward, nutrition and dietetics practitioners may find themselves in situations that aren't straightforward. In this case, a code of ethics can provide guidance for making professional practice and decision-making. The Code of Ethics also helps to define rules and norms for the profession, regardless of the practice setting. The Academy and the CDR Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetic profession establishes the principles and ethical standards that underlie the nutrition and dietetics practitioner's role and conduct. The primary goal of the Code of Ethics is to protect the public. This includes individuals, communities, organizations, and population groups with whom the practitioner works and interacts. The code includes 4 main principles, under which fall 32 standards. These can be mapped to the 4 foundational components shared with the healthcare and medical ethics. The 4 principles are competence in professional development and practice, integrity in personal and organizational behaviors and practices, professionalism, and social responsibility for local, regional, national, and global nutrition and well-being. The Academy and CDR Code of Ethics applies to all members of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, regardless of their credentialing status. This means that student members of the Academy must adhere to the Code of Ethics as well. Additionally, all CDR credentialed practitioners are held accountable to the Code of Ethics, regardless of their Academy membership status. So in summary, by accepting membership in the Academy and/or accepting and maintaining your CDR credentials, all nutrition and dietetics practitioners agree to abide by the Code. As previously mentioned, all Academy members and CDR credentialed practitioners are held accountable to the principles and standards of the Code of Ethics. These principles apply to a variety of roles and settings within the nutrition and dietetics profession. The Code of Ethics takes into account the adherence to core values of consumer focus, integrity, innovation, social responsibility, and diversity. You might pause this presentation to think to yourself, what does integrity mean? What is innovation and why is it important? Why do we need to value diversity in our field? The first principle of the Professional Code of Ethics is related to professional competence. The foundational component of non-maleficence supports this principle. Competence in professional development and practice includes 8 ethical standards. These standards address utilization of evidence-based approaches in all areas of nutrition and dietetics practice, interpretation of and application of scientific knowledge without personal bias, collaboration with other professionals and disciplines with referrals as appropriate, recognition of limits of scope of practice, and being respectful, caring, and mindful of patient and clients' individual differences, including cultural and ethnic differences. At this time, I'd like you to pause the presentation and read through the first 3 of the 8 ethical standards related to competence. As you read through these first 3 standards, I want you to think to yourself, what is evidence-based practice? What evidence-based resources are available? And what are examples of personal bias? And how could such biases influence advice that we could give to others? After you've had a chance to read through those first 3 principles and think about those questions, I'd like you to move on to principles D, E, F, G, and H. As you read through these principles, think about why collaboration with other professionals is encouraged, and how do you recognize your limits to scope of practice. After you have completed reading through these principles and thinking about these questions, you can move on to the next principle, which is integrity. The second principle of the Code of Ethics deals with integrity. Integrity in personal and organizational behaviors and the practices is supported by the foundational component of autonomy. The principle of integrity includes 9 ethical standards addressing full and truthful disclosure to individual patients and clients. These standards include disclosure of conflicts of interest, compliance with laws governing dietetics practice, appropriate use and maintenance of credentials, appropriate citation and recognition of work of others, accuracy and truthfulness in communication, appropriate billing, coding, and documentation, and respect for the patient-client autonomy and protection of personal health information. I'd like you to pause the presentation and take a second to read through standards A and B for Principle 2. As you read through these first 2 standards, think to yourself, what are some examples of conflicts of interest? As you continue to read through the next 5 standards in Principle 2, I want you to think about why appropriate and timely documentation is necessary. And finally, read through these last 2 standards. As you read through H and I, think about what information is considered protected health information, also known as PHI. What is the best way to protect this information? What is HIPAA, which stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act? How does HIPAA protect patients and clients? After you've thought about these questions and potentially jotted down a few notes, move on to Principle 3. The third principle of the Code of Ethics deals with professionalism. Professionalism is supported by the foundational component of beneficence. Pause the presentation and take a second to read through the first 4 of the 9 ethical standards. As you read through these first standards, think about how personal social media differs from professional social media in regards to what we say or post. Now I'd like you to read through these next 5 standards. Think about why we should be obligated to contribute to the advancement and competence of others. Once you've had some time to think about this, move on to Principle 4. The 4th principle of the Code of Ethics addresses social responsibility for local, regional, national, global nutrition, and well-being. This principle is supported by the foundational component of justice. The principle of social justice includes 6 ethical standards addressing collaboration with others to reduce health disparities and to protect human rights, promotion of fairness and objectivity, promotion of respect, integrity, and competence of the profession, as well as the unique role of nutrition and dietetics practitioners, engagement in services that benefit communities and enhance the public's trust in the profession, and engagement in leadership opportunities to enhance health and nutritional status of the public. Pause the presentation and take a second to read through the first 3 of the 6 ethical standards for Principle 4. Think to yourself, what are health disparities, and how can you help promote the dietetics profession? Now please read the next 3 standards of Principle 4. You might think to yourself, how and where should you seek out leadership opportunities? This completes the review of the Academy CDR Code of Ethics for Nutrition and Dietetics Profession. Next, we are going to discuss the makeup of the Ethics Committee, as well as procedures for ethical complaints and how alleged violations are handled by the Ethics Committee. Having an Ethics Committee helps make the Code of Ethics enforceable. The Ethics Committee is composed of 3 members, each appointed to 3-year terms. Terms are staggered, so there are never 3 new members serving on the committee at the same time. Each member of the Ethics Committee is jointly appointed by the Academy President-elect and the Speaker-elect with input from the CDR Chair in applicable years. The 3 members represent the Board of Directors, the House of Delegates, and the Commission on Dietetic Registration. An Academy member, non-member, or customer can submit a complaint to the Ethics Committee. The complaint must be made within 1 calendar year of the date that the complainant first became aware of the alleged violation, or within 1 calendar year from the issuance of a final decision in an administrative, licensure board, or judicial action involving the facts stated in the complaint. Anonymous complaints are not accepted. If a complaint is determined to be valid, it is forwarded to the person against whom the complaint is made for a response. The complaint and response are then reviewed by the Ethics Committee and discussed in executive session. These procedures are intended to permit a fair resolution of disputes on ethical practices in a manner that protects the rights of individuals while promoting understandings of ethical practice. The Ethics Committee has discretion to determine the best way to resolve a dispute when reviewing submitted complaints. Any of the following may be the resolution, including case dismissal, a request for more information, issuance of corrective action, such as completion of continuing professional education or supervised practice, or recommendations regarding the censure, suspension, or revocation of credentials. Membership in the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics may be censored, placed on probation, suspended, or revoked. The RDN or NDTR credential or Board Certified Specialist credential may be suspended or revoked. Before we discuss how to work through ethical issues, it's important to be able to distinguish what the Code of Ethics does and does not do. The Academy or CDR Code of Ethics protects the nutrition and dietetics profession and its credentials. It can be used to influence policy and improve professional practice. However, the Code of Ethics does not identify and reprimand all unqualified nutrition and dietetics practitioners, nor does it generally remove credentials from professionals. The purpose of the Code of Ethics is not policing practitioners. The focus of the code includes education, remediation, and self-regulation. There are a few steps to familiarize yourself with when working through an ethical issue. Accusing someone of an ethical violation is very serious. Consider the following questions before deciding if this is an ethical issue that should be brought to the attention of the Ethics Committee. Is this an ethical issue? Could it be an employment issue or perhaps a business dispute? Poor business practices leading to unsatisfied customers and other types of business disputes are not handled by the Ethics Committee. Is this a legal matter? Ethical guidelines are different than laws. If a state or federal law has been violated, the issue could result in action by the Ethics Committee. However, not all legal decisions may be considered an ethical decision. Is this a communication problem between a practitioner and a patient? Does it involve a disagreement between how an issue is handled by a supervisor? Is it a contract dispute? Philosophical differences and how someone manages a problem does not make something unethical. Ask yourself, what are the facts? Is this a personal issue rather than an ethical issue? Personal disputes are upsetting, but not unethical. Identify any possible subjective influences, such as your own attitudes towards a specific issue. Who are the key participants? Are they individuals? Are they organizations? If they are individuals, who are they? Remember that only Academy members and CDR credentialed practitioners can be held accountable to the Academy CDR Code of Ethics. If your concern relates to a non-CDR credentialed nutrition and dietetics practitioner that is not an Academy member, consider contacting the professional organization that represents that profession or their State Department of Professional Regulation. It is important to also remember that the Academy CDR Code of Ethics pertains only to individual practitioners and not organizations. The last thing to think about is if more or additional information is needed. Step 2 of working through an ethical issue involves connecting ethical theory to the dilemma in practice. Autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice are the 4 foundational ethical components we discussed earlier. Remember, autonomy deals with the ability to make an informed decision without coercion. Non-maleficence refers to the intent not to inflict harm. Beneficence includes balancing benefit and risk to benefit others, and social justice supports fair and equitable treatment of others. Reviewing these components can help identify how they may apply to an ethical issue. Step 3 involves identifying which of the 4 principles from the Academy CDR Code of Ethics is associated with the ethical issue at hand. It is possible that more than one principle may apply. Step 4 consists of alternatives to consider, such as how cultural influences may affect your decision? Or are there alternative solutions that better align with your own values or your institution's values? This step also allows you to consider what is involved in justifying the decision in terms of your own competence, how it may affect others, and whether it supports the code of ethics or the standards of practice. The last part of step 4 is to make a final decision. Once the final decision is made, strategies to successfully implement it will be needed. This may involve seeking additional knowledge to clarify the situation. Identifying ways to prevent a similar occurrence are also part of the process for working through ethical issues. Monitoring outcomes of the implemented resolutions will help with this evaluation. Now let's work through a few case studies using the 6-step ethical decision-making process we just discussed. I want you to think about each of these questions. Is the situation described an ethical issue? Is the situation described a business dispute? What principle of the Code of Ethics does it relate to, and how or why? What are the key issues, and how might you handle this as a colleague? So for case study 1, a didactic program in dietetics or DPD student who is a student member of the academy is in a computer lab at the university taking an online exam for one of his courses. The course syllabus specifically states that the exam is to be taken without the use of a textbook or class notes. One of the student's classmates observes the student referring to the text and notes while completing an online exam. So the first thing we need to think about is the situation described an ethical issue, or is it a business dispute? This would be an ethical issue. What principles of the Code of Ethics does it relate to, and how or why? This would relate to principles 1, 2, 3, and 4. It also relates to the Academy value of integrity and addresses attributes that should characterize all professionals, including students who are preparing to become nutrition and dietetics professionals. Cheating is not truthful and negates the integrity of the profession and the promise to comply within the law and regulation and codes of the profession. This inappropriate behavior observed by another practitioner would be reportable. The key points to consider is that the student is a member of the academy and therefore must adhere to the Code of Ethics as a student member. The student needs to recognize that he is being dishonest and is cheating. The student may not view his behavior as violating ethical principles in the Code of Ethics. And the situation points out the important role of faculty who need to review acceptable ethical behaviors in all classes and discuss consequences of professional misconduct, both during academic preparation and after graduation. This scenario points out the importance of putting the institution's academic honesty policy in all course syllabi, reviewing the policy and consequences of violating the policy with students, and providing students with specific examples of dishonesty, such as cheating on online exams. Disciplining of a student would be based on the appropriate policies for the class or the institution, and it would be appropriate to focus on the professional ethics as well. The student's letter of recommendations could disclose this infraction, and the action could jeopardize his or her ability to obtain a supervised practice experience in the future. A student who is dishonest and cheats his or her way through the DPD or DI programs may not pass the RDN exam or could become an incompetent nutrition and dietetics practitioner, possibly causing potential harm to the public and to clients. Let's work through another case study. An RDN colleague voices his opinion about organic versus conventional produce on several occasions. During an outpatient counseling session, you overhear this colleague strongly encouraging a client to use only organic produce, over the client's protest that organic produce is either unavailable or extremely expensive in her nearby grocery store. As the conversation evolves, the RDN suggests that the client purchase small amounts of produce so that the family budget will allow purchase of organic varieties. So is this situation described an ethical issue, or is it a business dispute? It appears to be a practice dispute about how to counsel clients. However, there is an element of ethical behavior related to providing clients with information that will most effectively empower them to make an informed decision. Again, this violates principles 1, 2, 3, and 4. This scenario represents both responsibilities to the client and to the profession. RDNs and NDTRs must show respect and consideration for patients and clients to allow them to make informed decisions. In addition, the RDN or NDTR should present evidence-based information to the clients. Some key things to consider is current scientific evidence supports increased consumption of fruits and vegetables to decrease chronic disease risk. It does not specify that these foods must be organic. As an RDN or NDTR, you have the right to your own opinion, such as the personal preference to select organic food for use at home. Dietetics professionals must allow clients to make informed decisions. The RDN's behavior may be considered disrespectful since the client voiced legitimate concerns regarding cost and availability. Patient autonomy, respecting patients' wishes, cultural and social values of the patient, and their ability to procure food items. Recognize the patient's economic situation, availability of resources, and ability to store foods. The RDN does not impose their own preferences or biases on a client. Social justice also plays a role in this scenario. Public health and access to resources that may contribute to health disparities. For this case study, I want you to think through the questions on your own. An RDN discovers misinformation posted by another RDN on a blog. The blogger's posting is not in agreement with a reputable science-based, non-government organization's recommendations and current scientific evidence. The RDN reader is familiar with the topic because he or she consults for a food company that relies on the NGO's information to support their brand messages. The RDN reader knows that the blogger is incorrect and perpetuating myths, and also worries that it could be considered a conflict of interest for the RDN reader to correct the blogger on the site. So at this time, I'd ask you to pause the presentation and jot down a few notes for the following questions. Is the situation described an ethical issue, or is it a business dispute? What principles of the Code of Ethics does it relate to, and how or why? And you might also jot down what the applicable standards are for each principle. In conclusion, the Academy CDR Code of Ethics protects the profession and the public. All Academy members and nutrition and dietetics practitioners credentialed through CDR are held accountable to the Code of Ethics. Upholding the code is a process of self-regulation. Each member and credentialed practitioner is responsible for enforcing the code of ethics. Becoming familiar with the code of ethics and processes for ethical complaints is essential for our profession. With the skills we've practiced today, your knowledge of the code, and resources the Academy has developed for members and credentialed practitioners, you will find the Academy CDR Code of Ethics as a valuable tool in making ethical decisions. You can now continue on through the remainder of the module.